chapter 17, verse 5, quickly, just to pick up the story. Michaihu. In English, we call his name Micah. The Hebrew pronunciation of his name is Michaihu. So when I say that, I'm pronouncing the name Micah. The man Michaihu had a shrine. Just to pick up the story, he made an ephod, household items. He consecrated one of his sons that he might become priest. So in this man's house, he has made an ungodly shrine to God. We talked last time at length about right things done in wrong ways and wrong things done in right ways. And I would say the fact that this man wants to worship Yahweh is a positive thing. But Yahweh said, even in the second commandment, make no idols, make no idols, make no images, no graven images, no molten images, have no images of God. And so Micah has taken it upon himself, this Michaihu, to make in his home a shrine to God. God says, I will be worshipped at the tabernacle in the Old Testament, not in your house shrine. So here we have Michaihu doing something that's right, wanting to worship God, but doing it in a wrong way, in a way that God did not prescribe for Israel. And so that's what we see here. He's got a home shrine. He's got an ephod. I showed you last time that was a garment that the high priest wore. He had household idols. These are statues, images of things that represent God, that are not God, but represent God. And he had even consecrated one of his sons to be his priest. Again, Israel was to be worshiping Yahweh at the tabernacle, which was set up in the city of Shiloh at this time. That no man had the right to make a shrine in his own house. The shrine, the tabernacle, the house of God, which is what the word shrine means, Bayit Elohim, the Hebrew phrase there means house of God. The house of God that God ordained was the tabernacle in Shiloh. This man took it upon himself to have his own shrine and to have his own priest. The family of priests were the Levites. Only the sons of Levi could be priests. This man is from Ephraim, and he's decided that his son will be his priest. He wants to worship God, friends. He's doing it all wrong. We don't get to make up our own rules. In verse 7 it says, Now there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah, and he was a Levite. So he's of the family of Levi, the tribe of Levi. He actually can be a priest. And he was staying there. It says in verse 8, Then the man departed from the city from Bethlehem in Judah. So this Levite goes on a journey. And this was his purpose, to stay wherever he might find a place. For whatever reason, he wanted to leave Bethlehem. And he wanted to find a new place. It says, as he made his journey, he came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Michaihu. And this is what we see on the map, just to orient us to the map. Here we have on the left, I did that wrong, but here we have on the left the map of all of Israel, the promised land right here. And then over here you see this map blown up. You see Bethlehem, this is where this man is from. And he's going to make this journey north into the area of Ephraim. That's where he's walking to. He leaves Bethlehem in Judah and walks north, and he happens to end up at the house of Michaihu, who has this shrine, but he doesn't have a proper priest. Verse 9 says, Michaihu said to him, Where do you come from? And he said to him, I'm a Levite from Bethlehem. And in Micah's eyes, boy, everything just got better. God, this is Michaihu's idea and his thought. God sent me a Levite. God has provided for my house shrine and has sent me a Levite so that I can worship here in my home. That's what this man was thinking. All wrong. So the Levite says, I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah. I'm going to stay wherever I find a place. Michaihu said to him, Dwell with me, son, you have found a place. God has led you to me to be my priest. He says, so dwell with me and be a father. This is a term of honor, a father. Be a father and a priest to me. And in return for that, I'm buying your services. In return, I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year. So they're going over the contract. Work for me as a priest, and this is what I'll give you. 10 pieces of silver a year, a suit of clothes, and your maintenance. And so the Levite went in. He agreed to live with Mechihu and be his false priest. Why do I say false? Because anytime you're bowing before an idol, that is false worship. In Jerusalem, there were not to be any idols. God said, and this is why. Maybe we don't say this enough. Why no idols? What's wrong with an idol? What's wrong with an image of God? And the answer is, it's not God. That's what's wrong with it. God says in the 10 Commandments to Jerusalem, to Israel, I'm the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me or beside me or in my midst. God won't let you worship Him and something else. Only Him. That's what the first commandment means. In the second commandment, He says that don't make any idols. And the reason is because you've never seen me. Why would you make an image of something that lives in the river or a beast, a cattle? Remember, Israel always was making what? What was the image when Israel made an idol? What did it usually end up looking like? What was it? A golden what? It was a calf. They took that straight out of Egypt. Out of idolatry in Egypt, the worship of the bull. So Israel would make this calf and they would say, this is your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And God said, do not make an idol because you've never seen me. Worship me as a spirit. Don't try to make me into something carved with men's hands. You've not seen me for a reason. One day you will, but none of us have yet. So don't make an idol of God because we haven't seen Him. And that's what Mechihu has done. He has decided, I will worship you, God, but I'll do it my way. And if I will, instead of traveling to Shiloh, to where the temple is, you see where Shiloh is right here, instead of traveling to where the tabernacle is set up, where the priesthood is, where the true ephod is, where the high priest is, where the animal slaughters are going on day and night, over and over, every day, instead of worshiping you there, I have chosen, God, to worship you here at my house. And God says, I didn't ask you to do that. I don't want it. I don't want improper worship. I want a right worship done in a right way. And if you go outside of the bounds of the Bible, you're doing it wrong. It doesn't matter how holy it feels or seems or how good your heart is in doing it. If you're not following what God tells you to do, you're not worshiping God properly. It's as simple as that. That's what this man has done. And now he thinks a Levite has come into town. Surely God's hand is in this. God is blessing my little house shrine. My house shrine, and He has sent me a Levite. And God says, no, you've got it all wrong. That's not the way I want you to worship me. So he makes an agreement with the Levite. Verse 11 says, the Levite agreed to live with the man. The young man became to him like one of his sons. They developed a very close, intimate relationship. Don't forget that as we get into the next chapter. The Levite was treated like a son. Mechihu loved this Levite who came to live with him, and the Levite loved Mechihu. They became intimate and close in their relationship. Don't forget that intimacy in just a minute when the Levite says, oh, there's a better offer? I'm gone. Just like that. What happened to all that intimacy and you be a father to me and all this relationship? When a better offer comes along, this guy is in the wind, gone. That's what sin does. When you start making things up on your own, we're all guilty of it. When we start making life up on our own, it's bankrupt. There's no stability in it. There's no foundation in it. There's no anchor of God in it. We we flit around thinking, well, this will please God. Oh, and they hear something on the internet. Well, no, this will please God. They hear something else. Read it in a book. Oh, this will please God. And nobody wants to go to this book and say, Lord, what pleases you? Tell me in this book what pleases you and I'll do it. But instead we're on the internet, we're in the self-help section at the bookstore, we're not in the Bible, so we continue to see people make it up on their own And Israel was horrible at making things up on their own, ways that they thought would please God. So what does it say here in verse 12? Micah, Michaiah consecrated the Levite. He didn't have the authority to do that. He didn't have the spiritual authority to consecrate a Levite, but he did it. He consecrated the Levite. He set him apart to his service in his house shrine. The young man became his priest and lived in the house of Michaiah. Then Michaiah said, "Now I know that Yahweh will prosper me, seeing I have a Levite as a priest." So here we have a right thing. He's wanting to worship the Lord. He gets a Levite priest. He thinks it's the right way to do it according to the law. It's all wrong. So we have a right thing done in a wrong way, and it becomes a disaster. It's done in the wrong place. It's done at the wrong altar. Everything is wrong about what's going on here at this house shrine. It's not according to the law of Moses. Don't anybody blurt it out, but does anybody know, because you've read the end of the story, who this Levite is? Remember who the Levites are? Priests of God, the set-apart tribe of God. The tribe that he accepted in place of the sacrifice of the firstborn sons, or the giving of the firstborn sons, the consecration of them to the Lord's service. The Lord said, "Israel, keep all your firstborn sons, every tribe. I will take the entirety of the tribe of Levi, and all their men will be priests to me." Levi. And here in this young man, we have a man from Levi. Remember who else was a Levite? Moses and his brother Aaron were Levites. I'm giving you clues here. We don't know yet until the end of the next chapter who this Levite is. You know what? I'm going to tell you. You know who he is? He's Moses' grandson. This false priest who has lodged at the house of Michaiah in the tribe of Ephraim, this false priest who left Bethlehem, this false priest who's not doing what God laid down for Israel to do through the man named Moses, this is Moses' grandson. And we find it very clearly in one of the last verses in this book. This false priest that's entirely walked away from the law of Moses, that's become a priest not at the tabernacle, not in Shiloh, but in this man's house, this is Moses' grandson. You think, wait a minute. The great man Moses, his own family member, fell away from worshiping Yahweh properly? Moses would have bounced this boy on his knee. Moses' grandson is not doing things right? What's the answer? That's exactly what the Bible teaches. When we get into the book of Kings, just as an aside, you'll see the great kings of Judah. One king named Hezekiah, who was among the greatest kings that Judah ever had, and his son Manasseh was the worst king that Judah ever had. You think, how could such a holy and pure and godly man like Hezekiah, how could he have fathered the worst king Israel ever had? Because the heart of man is all individual. We make our own decisions. I mean, Caleb could have the greatest dad there ever was, and he does. And Caleb could turn out lousy, a spiritual failure. Or, on the flip side, his father could leave the pulpit in disgrace one day. I could walk away from the Lord and make a shambles of everything that I know to be true, and that man could live to grow up to be a spiritual giant, despite the foolishness of his father. Because we all make our own path. We all choose our own way. And, you know, we raise our kids right. We raise them as well as we can in the Lord, the admonition of the Word of God. And one day, whew, and you think, what happened? 2 words, human nature. Sin nature. Independent volition. Everybody makes their own path. And so that's what we have here. We have the grandson of Moses. Totally off base. How could it happen? He's Moses' grandson. Because we all have an independent life to live. That's who this man is. Moving into the book of Judges chapter 18, let's move into it. It seems like for a few verses that we leave Mechihu and his Levite behind, but we don't. We do not. They're still totally in the story, but we're going to talk about the tribe of Dan for just a minute. Remember not Judah, but Jacob had 12 sons, the 12 sons of Israel they became. They became each a tribe, and one of those sons, his name was Dan, D-A-N, Dan, which means judge. So the tribe of Dan here in verse 18. Now, one more thing before we get into this. You have to forget the timeline for a while. Remember, we just walked through Ehud and Othniel and Deborah and Gideon and all the 6 judges. Forget the timeline. Then we got to Samson, and now we've stepped into Judges chapter 17, and you think, oh, this must happen after Samson. No, it does not. You rewind, not fast forward, rewind a couple hundred years to get to Judges chapter 17 and 18. Remember, Judges chapter 17 on to the end of the book, chapter 21, are examples of what Israel looked like during the period of the Judges. What happens in Judges chapter 17 and 18 happens in the early days of the Judges, probably at least 200 years before Samson was ever born. Remember, the book of Judges covers a 300-year period. So forget the timeline. These are examples of what was going on in Judges. And that's why the Levite can be Moses' grandson, because this goes back in time a long way to the beginning days of the Judges. So they're merely examples of religious apostasy in Israel. Verse 1 says, in those days there was no king in Israel. The writer gives us this reminder of the fact in those days there was no king in Israel. Instead of Yahweh being their king and them worshiping Yahweh based on how Yahweh told them to worship Him, according to the commandments of Moses, these people are doing whatever they think is right. Whatever they feel, whatever they want, whatever whim, whatever the culture is saying, do this, whatever they want to do, each man did what was right in his own eyes. So in those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for themselves to live in. For until that day an inheritance had not been allotted to them as possession among the tribes of Israel. Now that's an interesting statement, because look at what you see on the board. Look at this map. Do you see the tribe of Dan right here written in green? God had allotted them. Joshua had given them a land to live in, but they had never fully occupied the land. They didn't follow Yahweh faithfully into the land. They didn't take up the warfare that was needed. As a matter of fact, look what it says in Judges chapter 1, verse 34. Then the Amorites forced the sons of Dan into the hill country, for they did not allow them to come into the valley. Now God would have said, if you have faith in following me, I'll kick the Amorites out and allow you to kill every one of them, because that's what I've commanded you to do. It was the tribe of Dan that didn't have faith enough to do it. So instead of living here along the coast in all this area that God gave them, they start getting forced eastward into the hill country here. They start getting forced eastward out of their territory. It's not that they hadn't been given an inheritance, it's that they had never fully taken it. That was their fault, not Yahweh's fault. So they decide that they will uproot themselves from where God planted them, right here along the Mediterranean coast. They took it upon themselves because there was no ruling authority in Israel, and each man did what was right in his own eyes. They said, we want to go somewhere different. Did God say go somewhere different? Or did they just decide one day, because there was no king in Israel, we're going to get up and leave? That's what happened. Verse 2 says, so the sons of Dan sent from their family 5 men out of the whole number. They picked 5 men to be spies. Sounds so much like the sending of the 12 spies into the land hundreds of years ago. The sons of Dan sent from their family 5 men out of their whole number, valiant men from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and to search it. Search it for what? God's already given you your land. They said to them, go search the land, and they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micaiah, and they lodged there. So here they go on a journey. They leave Dan, they're going eastward and northward, and they end up in this house of Micaiah, where the shrine is and where the Levite is. That's not by accident. Verse 3 says, when they were near the house of Micaiah, they recognized the voice of the young man, the Levite. Now, I would say they recognized his accent is what they recognized. They didn't know this Levite from Bethlehem. They weren't from Bethlehem. But they recognized the fact that this guy stands out. His accent isn't what it should be. He's not where he's supposed to be. They heard his voice and realized this guy is also a sojourner. This guy is also on a journey. He has left where he's supposed to be. Interesting. I wonder if the traveling Danites were wondering about the success of the traveling Levite. He's left where God planted him. We're leaving where God planted us. Did God give him success? Interesting. Each of them was seeking a place where they shouldn't be, where God did not plant them. So they recognized this accent. They knew that this guy was not where he was supposed to be. They turned aside there and they said to him, so just the voice of the Levite has pricked these 5 men's interest. And so they go closer and they said, who brought you here? Because this isn't where you belong. Who brought you here? And what are you doing in this place? What do you have here? Why are you here? And so he said to them, the Levite speaks up and he says, thus and so has Micaiah done to me. So he tells them the story about the 10 pieces of silver and how he was just wandering around trying to find a place to live. And Micaiah offered him this job as a priest at his little house shrine. And he has hired me and I have become his priest. God's priest? Whose priest? Micaiah's priest. Micah's priest. Who made the Levites priests? Micaiah or Yahweh? See, he says, I'm not God's priest, I'm Micaiah's priest. I am his personal priest. That's not the way the priesthood works. They said to him, inquire of God. Talk about how lost. Israel just totally doing everything their own way. Why in the world, when they know they're in the wrong place, they know this priest should be at the tabernacle if they want to inquire of him, why are the Danites, this Jewish tribe of Dan, why are they asking this Levite to ask God what God thinks about their journey? Who should they be asking? They should be asking Yahweh, and if they want to ask a man, they should be in Shiloh at the tabernacle asking the high priest. Because the high priest had in his breastplate, remember the 2 stones? The Urim and the Thummim? And it was with these 2 stones that God would tell yes or no to questions of the high priest. It's all in the Old Testament. It's not spooky. That's where they should be. But they find a Levite, and they think, well, any Levite will do. Please talk to God for us. And what does the Levite do? Instead of saying, I can't talk to God for you, what does he do? Okay. He totally takes the authority out of the high priest's hands. And this guy, they say, inquire of God, please, that we may know whether our way on which we are going will be prosperous. We see that he has prospered you in making you this priest to Micaiah. Will our way as journeyers, as sojourners, be prosperous? Please ask God. So again, if you look at where we are and how close Shiloh is in the tabernacle, if the tribe of Dan truly wanted an answer from Yahweh, from God, they should have gone to the high priest at the tabernacle. That's who God spoke through. But they don't. They're idolatrous. They're superstitious. We see a priest. Any priest will do. He's a Levite. My goodness, he's a Levite. And so they ask him something. What did the Levite use to conjure up God? It doesn't say, but what would he have used? What would he have turned to speak to God? His household idols. His idols, his graven images, his molten images. He would have turned to his idolatry, to his little shrine in Michaihu's house, and he would have prayed to God there at this little false shrine, expecting his household idols for God to answer through these household idols. There's just horrible idolatry going on here. These men are outside the plan of God. All of them are. The Danites should have stayed where God planted them. The Levites should have stayed in Bethlehem where God planted him to do his service there. They're all on the run. It reminds me of another guy in the Bible who God says, go to this place and preach for me at this place. And this guy says, I don't want to do that. I'm going to go the opposite direction. What's his name? Ends up in the belly of a big fish. It's exactly what Jonah did. I don't want to stay where you put me. I don't want to do what you want me to do. I don't want to go where you have me sent. I'm going to do things my way. I'm going to do what's right in my eyes. And I'm going to flee from you, God, away from Nineveh. I'm going to go the other direction to Tarshish. And God says, no, you're not. No, you're not. He'll put you where he wants you. But sometimes he'll allow you to rebel. And that's what's going on here. We have rebellion in Moses' grandson. His name is Jonathan, by the way, the Levite. We have rebellion in Jonathan, Moses' grandson. And we have rebellion in the tribe of Dan to say, we don't have to stay where God puts us. We go anywhere we want to. God says, if that's what you want to do, you're going to make a disaster of things. But you can do it. I'll allow that. And that's what we see here. The priest said to them, go in peace. So they say, inquire of God, these 5 spies. And what does this Levite say? Go in peace. Your way in which you are going has the Lord's, has Yahweh's approval. Who told him that? Did Yahweh tell him that? No, he did not. The priest made it up because the priest does things his own way. As a matter of fact, this decision of the tribe of Dan, it's interesting that this one guy, this Levite, Jonathan, the grandson of Moses, could have saved the Danites from a whole host of idolatrous problems they're going to run into. If this man would have said, you know what, I have done wrong before God. My grandfather Moses did not prescribe these things this way. Follow me to Shiloh. Follow me to the temple or to the tabernacle. Let's speak to the high priest. If this Levite would have led spiritually and led these people, these 5 spies, to the tabernacle, God would have told them, go back to where I planted you. But he didn't do that. He took matters into his own hands and he said, God is with you. Look what happens in this area. This is what will happen. Dan is going to end up way in the northern parts of Israel. This is their journey. You can see it says Dan there, and this is where they will end up. Just a preview of coming attractions. What happens to the tribe of Dan? In 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 28, the king consulted. This is King Jeroboam. This is after the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom split. Rehoboam is Solomon's son, who's the king of Judah, and Jeroboam is the first king of the northern kingdom of Israel. This is Jeroboam. And Jeroboam is the king who consulted, and he made 2 golden calves. Remember Israel? They're suckers for the calf form. So he made 2 golden calves, and he said to Israel, it's too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. What did he just do? Don't go to the temple to worship God. I'll make my own little house, my little house of God. I'll make my own shrine. I'll make my own idols. It's exactly what happens in Judges chapter 17 and 18. It's exactly the same story of Micah making his little house shrines. Don't go to Shiloh. Don't go to the tabernacle. Worship God my way instead. And that's what Jeroboam said. Don't go back to Jerusalem to the temple to worship Yahweh. Worship Him my way. It's too much for you to go to Jerusalem. Behold your gods, O Israel, that brought you up from the land of Egypt. Micah would have said to the Levite the same thing. The Levite would have said it to Micah. Behold the teraphim, behold the idols, behold your gods who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Nothing new under the sun. Hundreds of years go by, same exact debacle. But what happened in the northern part of Israel? This Jeroboam set up one of these golden calves in Bethel, which means house of God, and the other one he put in Dan. What did the Danites say? We'll worship your golden calf. Set it down right here. As a matter of fact, we have a history of having false priests. Nothing new for us. Won't bother us at all. And Dan became a destructive, a leader of national idolatry in Israel. When they left the land that God planted them in, they took it upon themselves to move somewhere He didn't want them to move. And they were destroyed. Revelation. Just write this down. It's an interesting little factoid. Are there any consequences to sin? Are there disciplines for sin? Punishments for sin? You think Dan, having led national idolatry, left the territory that God gave them? You think it had any consequences to sin? I want to show you something. Turn with me to Revelation chapter 7. I want to show you a list. I want you to tell me what name is missing. You know, in the tribulation, God is going to call 144,000 prophets. He's going to call 144,000 missionaries. They're all going to be Jewish. And He says here in Revelation chapter 7, I heard the number, I'm in verse, if I could read that little bitty number, I'm in verse 4. I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000. Not all of all the tribes of the children of Israel were sealed. But look at the list of the children of Israel. Whose name's missing? Judah, 12,000. Reuben, 12,000. Gad, 12,000. Asher, 12,000. Naphtali, 12,000. Manasseh, 12,000. Simeon, 12,000. Levi, 12,000. Issachar, 12,000. Zebulun, 12,000. Joseph, 12,000. Benjamin, 12,000. Dan. Oh, wait. His name's not in the list, is it? Apparently from the tribe of Dan has been stripped, not the tribal identity, but the right to be one of His disciples, one of His 144,000 witnesses during the tribulation. No, Dan, not you. Huge. Huge. Still a tribe, will be eternally in the land of in the land of Israel. But He stripped them of the opportunity to go out into the lost world after the rapture of the church and be part of the 144,000 witnesses. Not you, Dan. We have a history, and it's time you pay. National idolatry was led in Israel by the tribe of Dan. And they paid for it. I just showed you. So, this priest has told them, this grandson of Moses has told them, go on your way. Everything's going to be great. Yahweh's going to lead you to a new land. You have God's blessing. None of that was true. The 5 men departed. They came to Laish, which is up there, the city that I showed you called Dan. The former name of this city is Laish. And so this is where they've gone to. They came to Laish. They saw the people who were living in security. They were at peace. After the manner of the Sidonians, they were quiet, they were secure. For there was no ruler humiliating them for anything in the land. So there was no foreign power that was suppressing them or oppressing them. They were a free people living in security and solitude and peace. They were far from the Sidonians and had no dealings with anyone. So here you have these people of Laish and the tribe of Dan. These 5 spies go up there and say, we could take these guys easy. We can, listen to me, we can steal their land from them easily because they are unwilling, unable, and not ready to defend themselves. We go where it's easy to take the land. They're secure. They're not near Sidon, so the Sidonians aren't going to come down and fight us. We can go in there, and what do they say? Like, without a shot fired, we can take over their land. And so that's what the cowards of the tribe of Dan decide to do. Verse 8 says, when they came back to their brothers, so they've come back down south, when they came back to their brothers at Zorah and Eshtaol, their brothers said to them, what do you report? Sounds just like the 12 spies from earlier. They said, arise, let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and behold, it is very good. Doesn't it sound just like the 12 spies in the book of Numbers? Good land, flowing with milk and honey. The grapes, anyway. They say it's great. We need to go. Will you sit still? Do not delay to go, to enter, and to possess the land. So these 5 spies say, this is great. We need to go in. The only problem is Yahweh was nowhere in their deliberations, nowhere in their conversation. He did not want them to be uprooted from the land that He told Joshua to give them. They had no right to go anywhere, but yet they did. And they're going to go up to a peaceful people who are safe from the Gentile nations of Tyre and Sidon, and they're going to steal it from them. Verse 10 says, when you enter, you'll come to a secure people with a spacious land. For God has given it into your hand. Interesting, in the book of Judges chapter 18, Yahweh's name doesn't appear anywhere except for the little false prophet saying, or the false priest saying, oh, Yahweh says go do it. We don't see, thus saith the Lord, anywhere. We don't see a word. We don't see Yahweh's name, Yahweh said this, anywhere. But they ascribe to Him things. And here's another one. These 5 spies say, God has given it into your hand. No, He hasn't. A place where there is no lack of anything that is on this earth. Another way to say that, a land flowing with milk and honey. Why do they think, just a quick couple of questions here. Why do they think God has given them this land? Why do these 5 spies think God is on our side? Why do they think that? Because of Micah's foolish Levite. Moses' grandson told them, Yahweh has said, your way will prosper. That's one of the reasons. Another reason, they believe God has led them to a city that's easy to defeat. God clearly wants us to leave our land and go to this land. Look how it'll be a cakewalk walking into this place and taking their city. Certainly, God is leading us. Peaceful people not prepared for war. They're living in quiet and solitude and security. They're not prepared for war. They're in peacetime. And there's no nearby strong power who could stop them. They're not close to the Sidonians. There's no authority over them. Here truly we have an independent community living at peace. So let's go steal their peace from them and take their land. No king in Israel, each man did what was right in his own eyes. And so that's what they decided to do. Verse 11. Then from the family of the Danites, from Zorah and from Eshtaol, 600 men. So now the 5 spies have turned into an army of 600 men. 600 men armed with weapons of war set out. They went up, they camped at Kiriath Yearim in Judah. Therefore they called that place Mahathna Dan, to this day, Camp of Dan. Mahna means a camp, like a campground, a camp of military, of an army. And it was west of Kiriath Yearim. It just tells us where it is on the map. But more importantly, keep going. They passed from there to the hill country of Ephraim. And here we have him come up again. And they came to the house of Mechihu. They passed through before when they were only 5 spies. They find a Levite. They recognize he has an ephod, household items, this house shrine. They go up to Laish. They say, these are the people we need to conquer. They come, which is interesting because they could have turned on the people in their own land, the Amorites, and conquered them in battle and taken the land God gave them. But for some reason, they were fearful to fight the Amorites in the allotted territory of Dan. They wanted to go somewhere where the fight would be easy up north. All of it reeks. All of this reeks of cowardice and all kinds of other things. So they've come back all the way back to the areas of Dan. They've gathered 600,000, or what is it, 600 men of war, and they're taking their families with them. They are leaving. The largest portion of the tribe of Dan is on a pilgrimage now to move up to Laish, where they will live from there on out. That's what we see here. But on their journey, they go through again the house of Mehihu. The 5 men who went to spy out the country of Laish said to their kinsmen, so here the 5 spies are saying, hey, let me tell you what's here. Do you know that there are in these houses an ephod, household idols, a graven image, and a molten image? Now therefore consider what you should do. So the 5 men say to the 600, there are things in that house that we could use, because they're all idolaters, not worshiping Yahweh. And so the soldiers have to make a decision, and they did. Let's steal the household idols. So verse 15 says, they turned aside there. They came to the house of the young man, the Levite, Jonathan, Moses' grandson, who was in the house of Mehihu, and they asked him of his welfare. How have you been? What do they want? They want the household idols and the ephod. They're making small talk. Verse 16, you can see the Levite looking out at the gate, and look what it says in verse 16. 600 men armed with their weapons of war, who were the sons of Dan, stood by the entrance of the gate to the house of Mehihu. You think that would be a little bit, just a tiny bit intimidating for an army of 600 men holding their weapons of war? The 5 men who went to spy out the land went up, and they entered into Mehihu's house, and they stole. This is thievery. One of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not steal. Forget that. We'll do whatever is right in our own eyes. So they took the graven image, they took the ephod, they stole the household idols, and they stole the molten image, while this priest, the Levite, Jonathan, Moses' grandson, stood by the entrance of the gate with the 600 men armed with weapons of war. Where is the great priest protecting the shrine of this God and his father figure Mehihu? Where is this great priest defending the home? He just steps aside and lets it all happen. When they went to Mehihu's house and took the graven image, the ephod, and the household items, the molten image, the priest said to them, what are you doing? He didn't say, stop, this is wrong. He just wanted to know what's going on. And so they said to him, be silent, put your hand over your mouth, and come with us. It wasn't enough for them that they stole the shrine and all the things on the shrine. They also want to steal the priest. So they say, you come with us and be a father to us and a priest. And look at the better offer. Is it better for you to be a priest to a house of one man, Mehihu, or to be the priest to a tribe, the tribe of Dan, and a family in Israel? So they make him a better offer. That's what happened. Why would you want to be a priest, an unknown priest, when you could be the priest of the tribe of Dan, one of the 12 tribes of Israel? And of course the priest said no. Or maybe in verse 20, the priest's heart was glad and he took the deal. The priest's heart was glad. And he stole the ephod and the household items and the graven image and went among the people. So these 5 men are the ones that actually took it, but the thievery, the theft, was accounted to the priest, who should have at least protected what he was worshiping falsely. So the theft was accounted to him. It says he took He didn't physically take it, but he took it. He okayed the taking of it, and he okayed the theft of himself also. So he took the ephod, the household items, the graven image, and went among the people. Then they turned and departed and put the little ones. We stop in this verse. They put the little ones and the livestock and the valuables in front of them. This is the tribe of Dan moving in caravan, expecting a reaction from Mechihu. We've just stolen his household temple, his little house of God shrine. He will react. He will come after us. So protectively, they put their women and their children and their livestock in the front of the caravan, and the 600 men are in the back. And that's where we pick up when we come back in a couple of weeks. Verse 22 we'll start next time. Moses' grandson. You want to know why? Circle verse 30. The son of Manasseh is a scribal change. The Hebrew says Manasseh, it has an N in it, but the original said Moshe. Just M-S-H, not M-N-S-H. They changed it to protect the integrity of the family of Moses. They changed the name. Manasseh is the name Moses. Gershom was one of Moses' sons, and Jonathan is Gershom's son. He is the grandson of Moses. But wouldn't you write to protect the name of someone great? That's what the rabbis did when they wrote this letter. Let's close in prayer.